Hi, this is Secherio, DIY Sewing Tutor. Today I'm going to teach you how to cut everything you need when you are sewing. We're going to go through key steps that is going to be fun. Don't forget to subscribe. Let's go into today's video. Let's start by knowing some parts of our fabric. First, we are going to know about the selvage part of the fabric. This is actually the base of the fabric. And then we're also going to assess the two important grain lines of the fabric. And then we're also going to know about the bias. The bias is actually the place you use to cut all your circular parts of the dress. So your flares and things like that, yeah. Then we are going to know the crosswise grain and then the lengthwise grain. These are the strongest parts of the fabric. So if you're sewing something that is meant to stand upright and be a bit straight, you should use those sides because they are way stronger than the bias side, which is most likely to like stretch out. Yeah. So yeah, it's always advisable to cut on fold like we already know. We are going to learn about the right side of the fabric. The right side of the fabric is where you can read the inscription on the selvage. The part that you can't read, that is like the part that's like turned when you behind it literally is where you would consider the wrong side or what is the wrong side. We are always going to cut on the wrong side because we want all our chalk markings and things like that to be on the wrong side so that it doesn't show on the outer side of the dress. And then start preparing it by first assessing where I'm going to cut, which is for me the strongest part, the lengthwise grain. If you're not sure, you can just stretch it out, not too much, but just give it a small stretch to understand the strength levels I'm describing here. So you use those sides to cut. You form the folded side there. Now I'm going to go in and start removing the labels we have on the fabric. Usually when we are removing those labels, we do not use our hands to remove those labels. I'm going to show you that. Once I know the right and wrong sides, I'm just going to go in also and mark those wrong sides right off the bat so I don't forget. Now I'm going to remove my labels, and I do not advise you to remove them with your bare hands. Always, press it before you remove it so that it just melts the glue behind it and then makes it so easy to remove. So that's what I'm just going to do quickly before I start working on this fabric. You see, it just comes off right off. Now there's some things I did in this video with the fabric. You can see that the fabric has some motifs you want to take notice of. It's like horses. Later in this video you see how I turned the horse's head upside down, but those are some of the things you also want to take note when you are preparing your fabric. The design in the fabric, the crosswise grain, the lengthwise grain, always consider that to make sure that you are cutting on the wrong side but on the lengthwise grain or the crosswise grain on the wrong side of the fabric as much as possible. And of course you're also respecting the design or the motif in the fabric. Now I'm going to use my pattern to assess if the folded fabric I have is enough to contain what I want to cut. So I'm using the pattern to measure every single part of the pattern, the necklines, the sides, even the length, everything. I want to make sure that the fabric I'm folding is enough to cut perfectly on fold on both sides without any hitches. So usually when you fold fabrics like that, you also want to make sure that the fold on the other side is also good enough to contain the shoulder. You don't want to cut the front shoulder perfect only to realize that the other side of the shoulder on the fold is short. Now let's go and do what the freehand cutters usually do. So freehand cutting, like the name goes, talks about just drafting and cutting directly on the fabric with all the allowances, darts and everything that you need on the final dress already done on the wrong side of the fabric. Remember, we are cutting along the grain lines, which is the crosswise or the lengthwise, usually the strong part of the fabric. So I'm just going to go in and then draft my pattern, what I would have done with the paper. But now I realize that, oh my god, I'm going to waste this fabric if I cut it this way. So, and this is something you actually cannot care when you are doing freehand cutting. It's not like a pattern that you can just lift and refold the fabric. So when you make a mistake like that, or you just feel like you're going to cut a huge chunk of the fabric off, you can always clean the markings you made and then remark. Yeah, you think I'm sure you're like, you have to start all over, but it's fun. It's good exercise for your brain to know more about drafting, so you can just go ahead and then do that. So yes, always measure, always cross check that you're having the right measurements with all the allowances, and then go ahead to cut. Put your hand always on the dress you are cutting, the final thing you are cutting. When you are cutting, don't use your hand to secure the fabric, rather secure the clothes you are cutting out of the fabric. So now we are going to cut the second part of the dress. What I cut was the first part. I said always cut the part without the zip first, so that you use that as a template to cut the part with the zip, regardless of whether it is on your front or your back. So I'm just going to go in and cut the zip part of the dress. And this is what I was saying, that I turned the horse's head upside down, but actually we move. So I continue to mark my zip line or my zip allowance and go ahead to cut, using the front part as my guide, or the part without the zip as my guide. Now I want to make a little, design or difference with the neckline at the back. So this is what I do. I make sure that I mark the shoulder point also on the back before I change the depth, like how deep the neckline was. So you always have to make sure that the shoulders meet before you cut. Okay, so once I saw they meet, and then I cut the neckline out, but a bit deeper, so that I'll have a different neckline at the back. So once I'm done, I'm going to now mark my zip allowance, because I want it pinned aside. I'm going to mark it on the part that has a zip allowance, and then pin it together. Now mind you, I have not separated this part. I've not cut through the zip line like most people would do. That is deliberate, because I always want to work with two things. I don't like working with different pieces. Sewing is already like cutting a fabric into small pieces of a puzzle and putting it together. I don't want to overcomplicate it, so I do not cut through the zip line until I am actually done joining the shoulders. So once I have it pinned out, I know that's already put aside. Now I'm going to go ahead and mark my wrong sides of the fabric again to get that out of the way. Yeah, I'm just going to check in that my shoulders meet at this point, and then prepare the fabric to cut my facings. And I'm sure you can realize the necklines are different from the front and the back in this case. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut my facings. I'm going to pick some fabrics I have, and see if they can help me cut the facings I need for this dress. Like I said, you can use different fabrics for this, but you always want to think through how nice it would be, because it's going inside the fabric. Okay, so you can use a plain lining fabric, or some pieces of other fabrics that might match well with what you're already working on. I just realized that this fabric was just not going to be enough, so I decided to use the actual fabric I was using from the beginning. You can also look toward the small pieces that you cut out up to this point, and see if they can be joined and used as a facing. If not, you can just cut directly on the fabric. Now I say the pieces because at this point you are not done with the clothes, and so you don't know how many pieces you would need, so you have to squeeze all you can to manage the fabric you have. Okay, so now I'm going to fold the fabric again, also on the crosswise grain, and cut my facing out of that. So how do I cut the facing? I put the neckline and the arm all the way to the armhole side on the fabric, and then I cut through it like that. So I use the neckline as a guide, the armhole as a guide, and then yeah, that's what it is. You can see that they match perfectly. When we are sewing, we put the facing on top and then sew the neckline and then the separate armholes, and then once we are done, we'll just reverse it, and then it goes back, at the back or the wrong side of the dress when you're wearing it. So usually that's what I do. Now that you're done, you can do the same for the back. Once you're done, you just have to join the shoulders, the sides, attach a zip, and then that's just it. Your dress is ready. Comment below if you have any questions. I'm here to support.